funding. Panelists are Ashley Robbins, a research analyst at Mobility Lab, a source of research and best practices for advocates to increase awareness and education about more and advanced transportation options. Her volunteer experiences and interest in transit led her to start her own transit blog. She's an organizational psychologist. She left consulting work to work on transit issues. The second panelist is Edward Silva. Mr. Silva is village manager of Palmetto Bay in Dade County. He is the chief administrative officer of that village, and he oversees and manages all village personnel and department operations. He's increased overall expenditures and enhanced delivery. And I personally am familiar with one of his projects, one of the news items that happened in Palmetto Bay involving stop signs, which raised quite an uproar, and I hope that plays into the conversation here. So who is first? First is Edward Silva.
Thank you. No, stop signs will not be part of our conversation. We'll do it this way. It's going to be a lot easier. I'm Ed Silva. I'm the village manager. But before I was the village manager, I was in charge of community development. And I was tasked in 2009, 2010 to look at our codes and see what was wrong with them. Our village of Palmetto Bay is a great success story, but it certainly hasn't happened overnight. Our village is halfway between Miami and Homestead. What you see up there now is a municipality. It's in South Miami-Dade County. It was incorporated in 2002, so we're 15 years old, and we have one of the lowest millage rates in Miami-Dade County. But how do we compare to the rest of the county? The median income for Miami-Dade County is $43,400, and ours is $107,000, so obviously we're doing pretty well, 2.5 times the median income. But the most important thing that you can see from this slide is at the bottom where it says new construction. Palmetto Bay has been very stagnant and has not had any new construction for our complete history, actually. And if you look to our sister cities to the south and north, the south would be Cutler Bay, and they had, and this was in 2014, they had $29 million in new construction, and in Pinecrest they had $82 million. So it wasn't where we were that there was something systematically wrong with our systems and our zoning codes. And we realized it when we started to look around. Another comparison is if you look at the Tri-City population, ourselves and our sister cities to either side, although we had 28% of the population, we really only had 9% of the commercial activity. Our residents were having a lack of quality of life. They were going elsewhere looking for their stuff to do. So what we did, first let me give you a little bit of history. We had a county-led charrette in 2004 to look at our commercial corridor. That led to a new code in 2007 that was really a hybrid. It was based on form, but it still had some of the Euclidean language inside of it. In 2008, due to the code, we had Miami-Dade Water and Sewer start doing a water and sewer upgrade for the whole area. That took about 4 years to complete. It was a $10 million project. In 2010, we completed our municipal center. We put our cornerstone into our downtown area, and that was the very, very first start of the new construction in the downtown area. But in 2010, we also went to the MPO because we're right next to the busway, which will eventually, hopefully, be an extension of Metrorail. And we got incorporated into the MPO's long term to include a multimodal building. In 2012, we in the village started doing a stakeholder review of FT&I code. We wanted to see what was wrong, how we can fix it, and what we can do. We held over 100 community involvement meetings. It was a long, long process, but we wanted to make sure that all of our residents were engaged. That led to a brand new code that was done in 2015, which is called the Downtown Urban Village Code. That code recently won an award in the Florida Planning and Zoning Association in 2016. But then we went one step further. Miami-Dade County, especially the South Dade area, was a very Everybody was having competing interests and trying to do different things. What we did is we spearheaded getting all the cities in South Miami-Dade, and there was 5 of them together, so that we could talk with one voice, because Miami-Dade County really didn't know which way to go. Every single city had a different ask. We all got together, we sat down, we came up with what we were wanting, which was light rail systems to continue all the way down the city of Homestead. It's a 20-mile corridor. In 2016, the village was awarded a $7.5 million GOB grant from Miami-Dade County to redo our main street, which is called Frangio Road. And we also got our very first unsolicited 3P partnership on our multimodal center. We created a business partnership group to help our struggling businesses, and so far our preliminary results are extremely strong. This is what our present condition looks like. This is buildings on our main street. Obviously, our front porch does not look like the rest of our community, and we have a very small general fund. We have our general fund on an annual basis around $13 to $14 million. So the real situation was, how can we really change our commercial corridor around? As I said before, we went through the form-based philosophy, but our first one was a hybrid, and it didn't really quite meet our needs. So much so, and I'm going to try to rush through this because they told me to hurry up. So much so that the first form-based codes created buildings like this. One of the biggest things here was we even had uninviting streets, and we forgot to put into our code language that we needed to have sidewalks on our streets. So they built a form-based code with nowhere for a pedestrian to go. We had problems. Land usage. When we first incorporated, before we were incorporated, Miami-Dade County's density was extremely high. Our FT&I code, which is the code that we just recently sunsetted, reduced the density. Our new codes actually reduced the density more, but yet it's being extremely successful. And the biggest reason for that is because we added flexibility into our code, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. One of the things we did with our downtown urban village, our pre-FT&I code would allow you to have 40 units to an acre. The DUV actually dropped it to 24. But we created a bonus pool of around 2,000 units that developers can come to the village and have a negotiation with us. And if they met certain criteria, and there was 5 of them: parking, landscape, green spaces, civic spaces, they were allowed to build inside their form base and pull units out of our pool and get approval through the council. That led developers to become our partners. We also understood that our right-of-ways in some of our streets just weren't wide enough for us to do what we wanted to do. As an example, our main street, which is Frangio Road, had a 70-foot right-of-way. How could we make that effectively wider and make this a complete street? What we did was we went to our code, and in negotiations with our developers, they now are building 15 feet in their property on either side to augment our sidewalks. Now that gives us effectively a 100-foot right-of-way, and it gives us the footprint that we need to really do a great cross street. And the developers are paying for this. We're not. One of the other things that I already mentioned was that mass transit was the missing link. Before we started to talk with Miami-Dade County, actually what they were going to do was leave the busway as it was and just have express buses on there. When we got all the cities together and we started to talk with one voice, the county included us into their SMART plan, which is a extension of the Metro Rail, and they have 6 different corridors. There has been numerous resolutions that all the cities in South Dade have passed in support of Miami-Dade County and the SMART plan. They've just started to do the NEPA studies. They just awarded those contracts. It's very, very promising. I believe that the county will probably begin building, hopefully, one of the corridors in the near future within a year or 2, and we're hoping they select the South Dade corridor, because that actually is the one that really needs a lot of help. Our vision for our downtown is obviously a complete street. We wanted to have connectivity to the bicycle network. We have an overall bicycle master plan that we need to really tie into. Miami-Dade County is also partnering with us in ensuring that we do some of the bicycle lanes in some of the other areas of our neighborhood. We wanted to make sure that we had wide shaded sidewalks, and this is an artist rendering of what our main street will look like. Narrow lanes, on-street parking, engaging storefronts, because this is all what's needed to encourage pedestrian mobility. Lush landscaping, artful elements in the streets, outdoor cafes, and public seating. Our vision for downtown, and again, this is a picture of our main street today. Absolutely not inducive for anybody to be able to walk there and or to get to mass transit. And thanks to the grant that we were able to obtain from Miami-Dade County for $7.5 million, this is what our main street will be looking like, and we've just put it out for bids. We expect bids back within a month. But one of the other things that we did in our code, which is a unique way of funding things, is we have a park impact fee. For every 300 units that a developer builds, they're putting $540,000 into the park impact fee. To date, we have $1.4 million from 2 developers into that park impact fee. Some other public-private options on the right-hand side is our multimodal center, which is on village property. The proposal that we have is zero cost to our taxpayers. The private entity is picking it up, will operate it, and eventually turn it over to the city. On the left-hand side is another private proposal that we have, which is going to actually create an elevated walkway, bicycle lane that will span US 1. US 1 has an island in the middle of it. It's 3 lanes, and that is a way to connect our residential area to the future transit station in unincorporated Miami-Dade County. Now, our funding projections. So far to date, the village has had $27 million invested in the downtown area. Most of our investment has come from grants and outside sources. Stormwater upgrades was done by Miami-Dade County. CITT is an annual piece of funding that we get. We have had Safe Route to School grants awarded to us. We had a $7.5 million general obligation bond grant given. What we have put out of our taxpayers' coffers is $1.5 million out of our surplus funds. That has translated to $530 million of developer investments in about 8-9 months. Our budgetary projections for our city, if we would not have this growth, we would be running a deficit within a year or two. And it would get to the point where our deficit would grow to about $2.2, $2.3 million, which is around 45% of our ad valorem taxes. On the other side, with growth, you will see that when you factor in the $530 million that we already have on the books, we won't have that problem. And what we can do is start concentrating on ensuring that our neighbors and the other residential areas' as quality of life continues to improve. So when we looked at the funding strategies, we looked at this 2 different ways. We wanted to ensure that we could really start the seed money to get our downtown area going and to get our complete street done in our downtown and tie into the network that we have throughout the village. So we went out and we aggressively pursued grants. We aggressively pursued partners, and we were very, very lucky to be able to get the funding needed to get the seed money going for our downtown. But we're also looking at this long term. How do you maintain it, and how do you keep the momentum going? One of the things that we're looking at is shared metered parking revenues. We're looking at creating a special taxing district, and we're also looking at transit and traffic impacts fees. Our role as government has been to lead and innovate, to develop rules that encourage growth in a managed way that adds to the quality of life of our residents and our neighbors, to provide incentives to stimulate local economy, to establish long-term revenue sources, to provide real mobility options. Our multimodal is going to be where our little circulator bus, the county's transit system, connections to their mass transit line, bicycle mobility, and pedestrian mobility. That's all where it ties in. To establish a mechanism that will focus on the management of resources long-term, because long-term is really what you need to look and focus on. To consider public-private partnerships And lastly, to stay the course. That's really important. We absolutely want to stay the course. We absolutely want to be able to go back and look at our rules and our regulations on a couple every 2 to 3 year term to make sure that we're on the right track. Those $530 million worth of projects, if you look at the map up there, the red buttons, is where we're having proposals that will be going through our planning department and to council in the next 2 to 3 months. And that translates into around 1,600 residential units, around 470,000 square feet of commercial space in a charter school. This is the very first project that was approved by council. This is 271 residential units above retail on our main street. This is another picture of it. This is another project that's going through the planning process right now on Frangio, around 300 residential units above retail. This is another project that is presently going through our planning department as well. And then I'll leave you with this one. This is another project that's going through the residential area as well. One of the things that we've been able to do and work with our developers, as an example, one of the developers is now going to give us around 2,500 square feet in a storefront free of charge and 75,000 build out so we can have a senior center. These are the type of unique things that our code is allowing us to do in negotiating with our developers and actually including them into our process in making our neighborhood a quality neighborhood that everybody will want to work, live, and play in. And lastly, I'll leave you with a rendering of our main street again, and any questions I guess we'll answer afterwards.
All right, so I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible. It's getting a little late in the day. So again, I am with Mobility Lab, and I started off, actually, as Terence mentioned, I'm a psychologist. I started off as an advocate, got so involved with what was happening in Atlanta that they offered me a job, and here I am several years later. What I started working on was the Transportation Investment Act of 2012, otherwise called the T-SPLOST. You guys familiar with this? Yes, one person? All right. Yes. The Transportation Investment Act of 2012 was the largest single-issue referenda in U.S. history. It was a 10-county referenda in Atlanta, and our counties are a little smaller than you guys have here, but that's a huge area for us. It put the urban core against the really outer ring suburbs. It was 1 cent over 10 years. It would have generated $8 billion. Had a predefined project list of 187 projects. 52% of that money would have gone to transit and complete streets projects. So, you know, you guys Broward County just came off of a referenda that, was unsuccessful. Unfortunately, it got 51% of the vote, but was married to a referenda that failed. This investment actually tanked. It tanked worse than anyone would have thought. It ended up with 37% of the vote. However, despite what politics and what the kind of the feeling around politics lately, to put it nicely, 71% of the transit referenda last year were successful. We see these trending upwards and upwards of where, despite the political climate, despite it being a very Republican election, people still want to see these investments. I think that sentiment was seen here in Broward County. It just, for whatever circumstances, didn't pass. We knew why this didn't pass. 187 projects over 10 counties, for one thing. It's very hard to see what you're going to get in your neighborhood. But there were clearly, in some areas it passed, and clearly projects that we knew were very necessary. When this failed, there was no plan B. No one knew what to do. And in fact, the fact that there was no plan B was a part of the campaign. Well, they came up with a plan B. In 2014, Clayton County went with just a bus campaign to join MARTA. So in 2009, the Clayton County commissioners canceled their bus service. This was a huge equity issue. This was huge. Anybody know where Clayton County is? All right, where? It's our airport. The airport of Atlanta is in Clayton County. So urban core, very, lots of revenue coming in. One of the poorest counties in Atlanta. They terminated the bus service. It was the second most successful transit service in Georgia. Georgia has 109 transit services. This was huge. In the 2012 referenda, there would have been $600 million to create a bus service for them. Because it failed, took a little bit of the politicians and the advocates getting together, creating a new game plan. They created a 1-cent sales tax to join MARTA. It was successful. It got 74% of the vote. Instead of getting $600 million for transit, they're going to get about $1.5 billion for transit. Half of the money will be used for a bus service. The other half is on a high-capacity transit service that hasn't been decided upon yet. Of course, there are hopes that it'll be commuter rail. Depends on what happens. Then again, Atlanta went back in 2016 for a 1-cent sales tax in the city of Atlanta, with money going to, actually, this is a little, I'm wrong. It was a 1/4 cent sales tax for Atlanta. Part of the money going to MARTA, part of the money going to the Beltline. It passed with 72% of the vote. It took a little bit of plan, but going back, the sentiment is definitely there, and that's what this is about. You guys came so close, just right there. It's not kind of the end of the world, but what can you do until you get referenda and legislation to go back? Just some examples of creative funding solutions. The Charlotte Gold Line is one of my most favorite ways that a city said to themselves, all right, we want to do this, we don't have money. In Charlotte, they had passed a referenda. It fell short of the mark due to the recession. They prioritized their lines. What didn't get prioritized was the streetcar service. Well, part of the alignment, they were doing streetscaping. The transit agency went ahead and put in rail in 2009. They knew this was a project they wanted. They knew they didn't have all the money to do it. So they did what little bit they could. It took them about 5 years to get there, but then they started with the construction, and now they have a streetcar. Breaking it up in phases gave them a little bit more of a funding opportunity. Green Communities is a project in Massachusetts, and I'm glad that Ed talked about the developers, because what Green Communities is a means of working with developers as they're building to get them to fund the projects that they want. They put in a little bit of money, and it goes. Private development, again, without requiring them to do it, developers understand the value of these projects. They want to get involved. They see how it raises the values of the developments that they're doing. In the city of Cincinnati, when the streetcar there kind of became questionable due to a new administration, the private community, the business community along the alignment, started chipping in the funds. They raised the money to continue the operations of the system before it was ever built. So that way they could say, we want this, we're invested in this. It doesn't hurt to reach out to them. They see the value. Within Arlington County, which is where I work, we have a menu item of options for developers to do. They can build a bike share station, they can build a bus stop, they can build a bike rack, they can put green paths around their development. But there are things that they are invested in to help get them into the zoning and get them to meet the requirements. CMAQ funds. This is Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Project funds. These funds are available. They go primarily to regions that are in non-attainment status for emissions. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, you guys meet your emission standards, but there's still a little bit of funding that's floating around FDOT that you can reach out. CMAQ funds go specifically to any project that will reduce congestion, getting people out of SOVs, so single occupancy vehicles. That can be bike infrastructure, that can be transit capital, not operations, but capital. So there are lots of ways that you can use that money to get a new project. And then, as it's kind of been mentioned several times throughout the day, tactical urbanism. There are a lot of things that you can do that are cheap, that are cost very cost efficient, cost nothing, or engage with the community to get them to do for you. Painting crosswalks, restriping roads when you're resurfacing, even just changing signal timing can make a huge difference and cost very little. So there's lots of things that you can do while you wait for more funding opportunities to come on board. And that is pretty stinking fast. So here's my contact information if you have any questions. And I think it's time for questions.
Questions from the floor? Questions?
Mr. Silva, the majority of the buildings that you all are doing, are there apartments or condominiums or a mixture?
There's a mixture of both. I guess it's enough. Did you hear me?
Mixture of condos. More questions?
Hello? Also for Mr. Silva, I was kind of conflicted on what I heard about lowering density but wanting rail service. So regarding the densities you and density bonuses you have settled on, was that in consultation with Tri-Rail or whoever would be delivering this service, so you make sure your transit capture area is meeting the demand needs that they need to have? And also with this construction that seems to be coming forward, is there an expected to reside number that it's actually going to be populating these structures? Because I'd be curious about that too.
Yes, there's two answers to that. Yes, we've been working closely with Miami-Dade County Transit on our downtown area. The density has been reduced in terms of overall density and constructions. For example, the code that was there before the one that we just adopted had 4,400 rooftops and around 6 million square feet of commercial space. The new code actually raised the rooftops to 5,500 units, but lowered the commercial to 2 million square feet because it was out of whack. So in reality, they're going to get a bigger residential share for Metro Rail. So that's actually on the residential side increased, on the commercial side it decreased.
Ms. Robbins, you have a small staff, and so you probably have to juggle and make decisions between applying for small grants versus big projects. What's your thought process? What's your decision tree look like? We're making decisions about which funds to pursue.
Actually, so we sort of have a policy of going for the smaller grants. It takes less staff time and overhead to go for small grants. The little ones generally just take less to get through the process, shorter timeline to go through the pipeline, and then you can get to implementing much faster. I can tell you that we are currently working on a grant from FHWA that took 2 years to even receive, and the amount of paperwork that comes through it, my director has decided we're never doing again.
Questions from the floor? Final thoughts from the panelists? Final parting words, advice? Okay.
I was going to say, and then we have this gentleman has a question, but do research to see what's out there. You would be surprised the way that you can get around things. There are areas that operate under huge constraints. My favorite example is the state of Michigan can only fund transportation investments with a millage. The millage can only last between 2 to 5 years. They go to the ballot continuously, but people want these, people see the value. Civilians really see the value in this. As sort of mentioned earlier today, the gas tax is never going to meet our needs. And rather than waiting for the feds to figure it out, do it yourselves. And you'll be surprised the creative ways you can come up with it.
And I will say, persevere. That $7.5 million grant that the village got was actually money that was earmarked already for everybody else. What we did was we went to our county commissioners, even though we kept getting no's, and we had a resolution passed that if any of that money ever came back, we would be first in line to capture it. And sure enough, it came back and we were able to capture it. So don't take no, just keep plugging away.
Great advice for much in life. Round of applause for the panelists.